Winter is still coming, but it's getting closer. This week, HBO released a trailer for the 7th season of Game of Thrones. Lots of dudes fighting with swords, riding horses, and pontificating about how screwed they all are. July 17th can't come soon enough. Also coming up, Warner Bros. Announced this week that DC's Superhero Girls is getting a fully fledged animated series. Created to promote its line of action figures, as most great cartoons are, the franchise about high school superheroes began as a series of animated shorts in 2015 and have since grown to include a one-off special and 2 direct-to-DVD movies. Now Warner Bros. Is working with Cartoon Network to produce a regular TV series scheduled for 2018. Over in video games, remember the Final Fantasy VII Remake that was announced at E3 back in 2015? So, what's been going on with that? It's been 2 years and we've heard nary a word about the game. They had to have made some progress with it by now, right? Well, according to a quarterly financial report, the Final Fantasy VII Remake is set to release between 2018 and 2020, but I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that it'll be closer to 2020 because Square Enix hasn't even completely hired their development team yet. Crucial job openings are available, so if you're a planner, designer, or programmer, for the livestream's sake, go and apply so this thing can get off the ground. Finally, in gaming news, Nintendo's ARMS Test Punch is running this weekend, giving people a taste of what the new franchise has to offer. Going into the game's online mode, players are put into a lobby system that sorts them into random games, in this case either a fight or a volleyball game. One-on-one fighting is pretty much exactly what you'd expect it to be, but unfortunately, unlike most Nintendo games, ARMS doesn't really benefit with more players. 2 versus 2 matches are okay, but the 3 and 4 player brawls are just too imbalanced to be entertaining. The level design has some balance issues of its own, particularly the stage that has you fighting on a set of stairs. Let's just say that collision detection leaves a lot to be desired when you throw the Y-axis into the mix. Volleyball mode is surprisingly fun though, and a really good way to familiarize yourself with the timings of each character's punches. Different arms have different effects on the ball, giving the game mode an unexpected level of depth and strategy. As far as controls go, I spent the entire test run using the game's motion controls, and while I can see why Nintendo came up with this control scheme, it doesn't mean it's a good idea. Imagine playing a fighting game where the analog stick and the attack buttons were one and the same, and that's basically how ARMS works. When trying to move around the arena, anything more than a slight wrist motion will launch an unintended punch, leaving you vulnerable to attack. The arms themselves seem to have a mind of their own as well. You can try to guide them to their targets, but that's easier said than done. At one point in the match, I'd even accidentally thrown my left Joy-Con across the room, and somehow my character kept on throwing left punches even as I was walking over to pick it up. Next time around, I think I'll give the regular controls a go. Overall, ARMS was entertaining for an hour, but Nintendo has a long way to go before I'm convinced that this game has enough to offer to warrant a purchase. But enough about ARMS, let's talk about movies. Coming out this week in theaters, we have Wonder Woman. Will this be it? Will Warner Bros. Finally make a decent superhero movie? Early word is good, so let's hope that this kicks off a new era for the DC Cinematic Universe. Over on television, Scream the TV series is being revived for a 3rd season this week. The show is getting a reboot with a new showrunner, a new cast, and Queen Latifah as an executive producer. MTV had previously announced that Scream would be back for 6 episodes and continue storylines set up in last year's Halloween special, but with a new showrunner, cast, and production company, it's unclear, though probably unlikely, that any of that is still true. Also, you may have noticed that there's not a trailer playing right now. That's because, as near as I can tell, there isn't one anywhere on the internet. That's not a great sign for a show set to premiere in 3 days. Meanwhile, on Netflix, House of Cards is back for its 5th season if you're looking for a more sensible and realistic political drama than the one unfolding on CNN every day. I do not envy this show's writers. Their job has gotten so much harder in the last year. And in video games, we have Dragonia, because you know what every twin-stick style shooter needs? Nudity and sexual content. Obviously. Speaking of nudity and sexual content, give it time and that'll probably get modded into Star Trek Bridge Crew. And even if it doesn't, this game still makes the most compelling case for pulling the trigger on a VR system yet. For something more traditional, Illusoria is yet another great-looking 2D platformer that makes me feel bad that I don't get around to playing more 2D platformers. Games like this seem to come out a couple times a week, but this one in particular has some very nice animations. For tower defense this week, Locke's Quest looks like a really neat mix of tactics RPG and tower defense, which I can't actually think of anything that could possibly swallow more time. If you never hear from me again, it's because I either died or bought this game. And speaking of tactics, Alavora Tactics is a retro-style RPG with a tactics-style battle system that looks like it could be worth a look. And going from old to new, Tekken 7. For the first time, the Tekken franchise hits the PC, not counting Street Fighter X Tekken, so if fighting games are your cup of tea and you don't have a current-gen system, well, maybe still wait and see how the PC port turns out. Fighting games don't have a great history with ports. And finally, Goner isn't a new game, having come out on PC last year, but this week it arrives on the Nintendo Switch, which is building up a pretty substantial library of indie titles. The game itself is a 2D shooter with roguelike elements that reminds me of a crossover between Metroid and Mega Man X with some crazy graphics. And that leaves us with this week's awesome video. The game theorists are doing what was never meant to be done by applying real-world physics to Mario Kart, which is actually more real than you might think.
Believe it or not, there are actual carts that can go up to speeds of up to 200 kilometers per hour, or about 124 miles per hour. 124 miles per hour, and get this, they're used for actual kart races. Souped up supercarts blasting around tracks at over 100 miles per hour. In other words, Mario Kart is a real sport.
That's everything for this week, so what are your thoughts on ARMS? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, you know what to do. Hit the button and share it with your friends. If you're not already subscribed, I would highly recommend it, and be sure to have a great Memorial Day.